Hello and welcome to Game Changer. I'm Maryam Zia. Shockwaves have hit economies across the globe as President Donald Trump has imposed a universal tariff of 10% on imports. When we look at his statement, he declared on April 2nd, 2025 as, of course, the Independence Day for America's economy. With 60 countries facing tariffs as high as 50%. That risk was seen around 1910. This aggressive move has drawn strong reactions from economies across the globe, with countermeasures from countries like China, which now faces around 54% tariffs. And it has also drawn criticism from European Union. More than 50 countries have now reached out to White House for negotiations regarding these tariffs. We will be talking about all these dimensions in today's program. For Pakistan, the stakes are high. And when we look at the total exports to US, they make up around 0.16% of total US imports. That amounts to around $6 billion annually. But now Pakistan is facing 29% tariffs, which is of course high. But Finance Minister Mohammad Aurangzeb stated that this is not something we are overly concerned about, but we want to address the issue. In today's program, we will be talking about all these dimensions, how global economies are of course impacted by this decision, this bold move of President Trump, and how this could be a game changer for global economies in coming days and coming years. To discuss this and more, we are joined in the studios by Dr. Usman W, who is advisor on economy to CAS. Welcome to the program. We're also joined by Dr. Aima Mehdi, who is an economist. Welcome to the program. And we are joined by research fellow at Chohan Institute, Mr. Sheng Xinghong. Welcome to the program. Dr. Chohan, let me start with you. Of course, when we look at this statement by President Donald Trump, he dubbed April 2nd, 2025 as the Liberation Day for US economy. And he declared a universal baseline tariff on imports into the US. How do you view the impact, the short-term impact on economies across the globe?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's important to understand that we always expected Trump to do wild things, but perhaps people didn't realize how wild this policy could be in terms of how damaging it will be to the United States. Not just to the rest of the world, but America itself. If you look at the calculation, it is so rudimentary and ridiculous that it doesn't fall into any mathematical logic.
Exactly.
Basically what you have is Pakistan exports 6 billion. Pakistan has a surplus of 3.5 billion. 3.5 divided by 6 is 58, or 0.58. Therefore, you divide that by 2 and you get 0.29. It's just totally made up. And the same has been the treatment for all kinds of other countries, including countries not inhabited by people, just territories. So I don't know which penguins he expects will pay those tariffs. The fact is that when they put up the formula on the internet, on the White House page, they did point out in a fancy formula that they had a factor of 1.4. 1 over 4 multiplied by 4, and that was the constant put in the denominator. It's all a lot of ridicule, but what you have correctly stated at the same time is that it can have real world effects for exporters. I think our finance minister has made a very good point that you shouldn't be overly concerned about it, but you should try to resolve this situation. But there is the strong consideration among many countries.
But Dr. Chohan, when President Trump was announcing these kind of tariffs on countries like Canada and Mexico, we were talking to different economists and experts, and they were of the view that Pakistan will not be impacted by it, although US remains one of the biggest trading partners for Pakistan, but the trade volume is 0.16, is very low, but still 29% is huge. Is it concerning for Pakistan in your view?
No, I share the view of the other economists because basically it is true that the US is the largest export market, but our exports are not that significant. We export 20 something. You can say $25 billion worth of exports. 6 billion goes to the United States, that's the biggest chunk, but it's not the same as, for example, Canada's 80% of trade with the US or Mexico's 80+% with the US. It's max 25%. And we have 40 billion of imports, so 25 of exports and 40 billion of exports. And the gap is more than filled by the strong remittances. So you get $3 billion a month now, you'll probably have 36 billion for the fiscal year. So 36, your remittances equal your imports more or less. Anything you export above that is good. So what I see in the long run is that Pakistan, if it works hard, will find other markets and create new products to sell.
But it will take a time for Pakistan to diversify. We will be coming to this point later in the program, but let me go to Dr. Aima. Dr. Aima, President Trump described this move as a response to, quote, being looted, pillaged, raped and plundered by both friends and foes. Given that effective US import tax rate has surged from 2.5% in 2024 to 22%, this rate we have not seen till the year 1910. What's your take on this and how this is going to be impacting inflation, recession in the coming days?
Thank you for having me and putting up such a comprehensive question. The thing is, we've seen an enormous, surprising, and completely unexplainable, illogical sort of raises in tariff rates across the globe, especially for countries like China and Vietnam, Laos, India, and then Pakistan. The thing is, when this happened in 1910, it was then followed by recession and Great Depression. And after the Great Depression, the US was able to negotiate a lot of trade conditions according to their own will, things that benefited the US economy, and things like WTO, etc., came into being, in which US has had a substantial say and substantial hold. So because US has been the engine of the global economy, it has also been one of the largest markets, and a lot of countries have actually benefited from having US as its market and demand. But then, conversely, when US does something as illogical or as unexplanatory as these tariffs that Trump has announced, what then happens is the entire global economy comes to a halt. You will see that the markets, financial markets across Asia has plummeted. It's like a
Right. And of course, you mentioned about a lot of economies benefiting from US. Don't you think that US has also been benefiting from the poverty of these nations, especially when we talk about countries like Vietnam that has been impacted the most by these tariffs, and Pakistan is also 33rd on the list out of the 60 countries that are affected by these tariffs. Dr. Aima? Right. What's your take on this, Dr. Chohan?
I believe that countries like Vietnam, which you're asking about, have done very, very well in trade because they had a very, very deep focus on trade. Vietnam imports 88% of GDP to export 93% of GDP. It is a slim margin, but at the scale of GDP that it does it makes hundreds of billions of dollars. Pakistan could also have that sort of system where you take the south of Pakistan and you make it just come in and just go out. The purpose is not to actually do, and you have the north of Pakistan working on the domestic economy. But insofar as the trade policy of America now goes, I will give you the most simple and most important way to understand why it is illogical. Trump has promised two things to the American people to sell this garbage to the Americans. He says, I am going to raise revenue, $6 trillion. I'm going to raise revenue from import duties, and I'm going to have manufacturing created, a manufacturing renaissance. Here's the problem. If you are importing, and then only can you get that $6 trillion, so you're importing, you won't have the manufacturing renaissance because you're continuing to import. And if you are having a manufacturing renaissance, you're not going to be importing, you're going to be making things yourself. so you won't get that $6 trillion. So the fact is that he has taken these two totally mutually exclusive points and sold it to the people, and it doesn't make any sense. That shows you enough about how this is being argued. It isn't thought through. It is a madman strategy, and it isn't going to work for America.
Right, that is not going to work for America, and that is what we are hearing from China. Mr. Chang, when we look at the statement coming from Chinese Commerce Ministry, it has stated that the US's unilateral tariff actions completely disregard the long-standing balance that has been achieved through different multilateral trade negotiations, and China has, of course, vowed to take countermeasures. Could you elaborate on some of the specific measures that China is planning?
Yeah, this Trump's action has seriously, affected the world economy. Nowadays, the stock market, almost all over the world, especially today, China, Japan, and South Korea all go down very sharply. Maybe only Pakistan is in a little better position. So this is the disaster for all of the world. And I think I believe that Trump's tariff policy is having serious impacts on many aspects globally, including at least the following aspects. One is the global multilateral trading system. Trump's reciprocal tariffs, he calls reciprocal tariffs, ignore the World Trade Organization's most favored nation treatment principle and the dispute settlement mechanism, replacing multilateral negotiations with unilateral actions, directly challenging the WTO's fair trade rules and existing global multilateral trade framework. And second, I think the global economic growth will be affected seriously due to the uncertain tariff policies of the United States. Global economic growth will further slow down. Third is the stability of financial market. The tension and uncertainty in the global trade situation can trigger financial market volatility. The investors concerned about the economic outlook have intensified, and the flow of funds may change. With significant fluctuations in the stock market, foreign exchange market, and bond market, and other markets. The fourth, I think it accelerates global political and economic contradictions. Trade frictions may trigger political conflicts, and even in a certain way, conflict or war, and also diplomatic tensions between the countries. Trade disputes between some countries may evolve into political confrontations affecting international cooperation and the cooperation of multilateral mechanisms. The fifth is to weaken the authority of multilateral trade agreements. The intensification of trade frictions has led countries to pay more attention to their own trade interests, while trust in multilateral trade agreements has decreased. Countries may be more inclined to protect their industries through bilateral negotiations or unilateral measures, which could weaken the authority and effectiveness of multilateral trade agreements in coordinating global trade relations. So the world will be affected very seriously.
Right. Very pertinent points raised by you, Mr. Chang. Dr. Chohan, what's your take on this? Of course, Mr. Chang alluded to, this can be leading to war as well. And in your opinion, do you think that Trump is using these tariffs or might be using these tariffs as a tool for creating or leading to wars in coming days or coming years, because we have seen such statements coming from the White House, where Trump has stated that if any country dares to go into war, then we will be imposing 100% tariffs on the country, and then they will be calling my office and they will be saying that, sir, we are not going into war. So what's your take on this from geopolitical perspective?
Yes, thank you for this profound question. I agree with Dr. Cheng Shizhong. It is true that there is a combat element to trade, and the fact is that trade has always been an element of combat. It has always had an element of combat. When the British invaded China, they used very dirty tactics, and they used a lot of terrible tools to try to open up the markets beyond the Canton system. They did it back then, and the British in the Second Opium War did something truly evil. They declared war on the Qing Empire in the name of free trade. So you can see from that when it suits these Western powers, they're very happy to use the banner of free trade, even to declare war against other societies. But when they are sloppy in their own execution, nobody else did anything to them when they're sloppy.
And the irony of all this is that we know that President Netanyahu is going to be meeting Donald Trump today to discuss these 17% tariffs that are imposed on Israel.
That is also true. And I think that the countries that Trump expects to come with a beggar's bowl are fools, and I think Trump himself is a fool for thinking this. The best move for other countries is to pursue multilateral trade agreements, as Dr. Cheng Shizhong said. It is not for the rest of the world to be dragged into this mess that the American establishment is creating. You have to look at this in terms of the larger context. The world that Trump wants to go to is a world where America used to be irrelevant anyways. The U.S. was historically a protectionist country. After 1776 and up to 1912, it was protectionist to be able to promote its own nascent industries, and that sort of protectionism made sense so that it could come and compete with countries like Austria, United Kingdom, etc. Then it actually pushed free trade in very clever ways through the Atlantic Charter and then through the Bretton Woods system. And the fact is that if trade is a combat, America was winning this combat. It was winning left, right, and center. And now Trump's program is going to make America start to lose, and lose hard. The American worker is going to pay $4,000 more. The American manufacturing is not going to come back because sweatshops are not going to pop up in America. The AI and robotics would come up in factories anyway, so jobs won't be created. The deficit that America runs is because the world uses the dollar. They're not going to use that anymore.
Dr. Chohan, when we look at the statements coming from White House and from one of the top economists, Stephen Miran, and many others have suggested that these tariffs and tariff hike may cause initial disruptions for the US consumers, but in the long term they are going to be benefiting them. What's your take on that? And also, we cannot forget that global markets reacted sharply, wiping out $5 trillion in S&P 500 market value within 2 days after the announcement. What are the likely spillover effects in Pakistan?
You're exactly right. So your second statement is the proof that the first statement doesn't make sense. The second statement is that the S&P declined hard and $5 trillion of paper money was eviscerated, paper wealth was eviscerated. So that points to what Stephen Miran is saying, because the market prices in significant losses. Why? Because many companies in the United States that are listed on the S&P 500 are operating on a very thin margin, like 5% margin or so. And when the costs are going to rise, their input costs, the cost of goods sold, then the income statement is going to compress those margins further, which means that the earnings are going to go down significantly. And as the earnings go down, then the valuations of the companies on the stock market are going to decline, and that's what we saw. So whatever Dr. Stephen Miran or whatever is saying is incorrect, because in the long run, America will not have the jobs that Trump is promising, because the factories of the future have AI and robotics. They don't have sweatshops like he wants to bring in. So it doesn't make sense. There are many apologists for Trump in his administration, and some academics who want to survive the post-Trump world in America, and they are selling their souls. They are speaking on behalf of a system that will ruin America. speaking in the best interest of all countries, not just America, I think that we should have more open trade, better competition, and more harmony in the world. And you're not going to get it from this kind of trade warfare. The biggest loser from this is the United States, of course, as well as the countries that have depended for far too long, such as Canada. Canada has been very smart and very pragmatic and very bold about this because they know their capabilities. Canada is a great country. It is the country of the future. They don't need to depend solely on the United States. They can absorb this pain now, but they didn't sacrifice their dignity in the past. You can look at the War of 1812, and Canada will not sacrifice its dignity again. And I think we can all learn a lesson from Canada.
Right. We can all learn a lesson from that as per Dr. Chohan's opinion. But Dr. Aima, take on this that we are reading statements coming from the White House that more than 50 countries have reached out to US to negotiate on these tariffs that are imposed on more than 60 countries. Of course, in your opinion, do you think that Trump is using these tariffs as a tool rather than as a weapon to negotiate other trade issues with these countries?
I think it's the same tool or weapon. It's the same thing, but the mentality that Mr. Trump is operating right now on is the fact that he wants to get over the trade deficit, the debt, because US has the largest outstanding public debt, and much of it is held by China, and it's trying to get rid of the tax system, which people think is flawed, the health system, the trade deficits, and it's increasing the number of people who are employed in the US. So the US probably thought that all the countries are going to come down begging, which I don't think should have happened. And the premiership, which is trying to negotiate the tariffs, is just because in the short run, the exporters cannot really negotiate with other countries and cannot find markets. But in the long run, I think all the countries can find alternative markets. They can be competitive enough, and the businesses will be able to settle down. But for the short run, because the entire world right now is operating on very, very tight economic conditions, because one, there's war around the world, there's global warming, there are other issues. So just, when businesses are in motion and when they're producing, if you have a certain amount of demand that exists and you have a customership that exists, it makes it easy for the economy to flow. So right now, why a lot of premierships want to negotiate with Trump is because they want a smooth tackling of whatever is being produced, and they want that market. However, in the long run, I think all the countries that export to the US can find alternative markets, and things will settle down, and the US will lose in the long run. It's just in the very short run that US is trying to bring everybody down, the global markets down. Even if you see in 2018, when Mr. Trump, when US they applied certain type of tax on agriculture, it was the US farmers that were worse off than other countries that were exporting to the US. So it's a thing that is just for now, and I think later on in the medium to long term, it's the US is going to pay the price themselves because of these aggressive tariffs and targets, and other countries will eventually find more markets, and they will find their own ways, and things will settle down. But
diversify their trading partners, right? But Dr. Aima, how do you see the pressure from within US against these tariffs that are imposed? Because like you mentioned about 2018 as well, and we know that tariffs are collected by US Customs at 328 ports, and companies typically pass these higher costs to consumers at the end of the day. So this is going to be causing inflation in US as well.
That's exactly correct. So 2 months ago, the US Fed and the National Economic Association in the US, they passed a statement that inflation in the US will go higher, which is why Fed did not decrease its interbank rates any further, because Fed rates remain stable. It was for the fear that inflation in the US will get out of control, because the import costs, and all the raw material costs in the US are going to be much higher. So one, there is inflationary effect in the US. The other thing about the US right now is they don't have enough labor, they don't have cheap labor, and the fourth thing, even if they build industries, they don't need labor. It's a lot of it is already automated and is going towards automation. So there is pressure in the US. If you see yesterday's news, people have been rioting and protesting across all the states in the US against Mr. Trump and his tariffs. So it's evident that people in the US are very unhappy with these moves and they are not in favor of Trump's premiership. And there's a lot of resistance within, and they know there's going to be inflation. They know there's going to be a slump, and they know the ground reality. So there's a lot of retaliation already.
And talking about retaliation, coming to you, Mr. Chung, and talking about reciprocal tariffs, how do you think, what are the long-term implications for China's strategic positioning in the global markets in coming days?
China actually is the main target of American high tariffs. And, around China, Vietnam, and ASEAN countries, they also have put very high tariffs on them. And because China has a lot of factories there, so the main target, I think, of American strategy is still China. And in the increasingly volatile global trade environment, China, because China itself is a very strong and very big economy, so China can adjust its economic strategy in the following ways to mitigate risks and maintain long-term growth. Ways, I think, is to promote industrial upgrading and innovation, strengthen investment and development in strategic emerging industries such as high-end manufacturing, electronic information, biomedicine, aerospace, etc. Improve product technology content and added value, reduce dependence on low value added and labor intensive industries, and enhance the industry's position in the global value chain. The second, the Chinese strategy, I think, is to strengthen the technological innovation, increase research and development investment, improve independent innovation capabilities, break through key core technology bottlenecks such as chip, software, high-end equipment manufacturing, and other fields, and enhance industrial competitiveness. The third, I think, is to deep the Belt and Road cooperation and strengthen trade exchanges and economic cooperation with countries and regions along the Belt and Road. The fourth is to strengthen regional economic cooperation, actively participate in and promote the implementation of regional free trade agreements such as the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, deepen economic cooperation with neighboring countries, including Pakistan, and build stable regional industrial and supply chains. The fifth is to explore the domestic market, because Chinese market is huge. China itself is a big market. So accelerate the construction of a new development pattern with domestic circulation as the mainstay, and the domestic and the international circulations mutually promoting each other, and expand the domestic demand market. Sixth is to actively participate in the reform of a World Trade Organization, maintain the authority and effectiveness of multilateral trading system, and promote the establishment of a more fair, open, and inclusive global trade rules system. The last point is to actively advocate the concept of openness, cooperation, and a win-win on the international stage, opposing trade protectionism and unilateralism, promoting the construction of an open world economy, and making positive contributions to the global economic growth. Thank you.
Right, you have very eloquently mentioned all the points, all the necessary steps that are needed, but I want to discuss a bit more about the point of China playing a more kind of leading role in kind of balancing or creating a more balanced multilateral trading system, because we know that Trump's tariff systems are not really limited to China, but to its allies as well, like EU, and they are also considering different countermeasures as well. And this has changed global trade dynamics and has posed serious threats to it. How do you see these measures are going to be influencing China's trade negotiations, both traditional partners and non-traditional partners, in coming days? Mr. Chang.
And the tariff war. The resilience of the Chinese economy has been fully demonstrated. Faced with the external pressure, China not only increases tariffs to defend its own interests, but also actively seeks to adjust and optimize its trade structure. In summary, I think the escalation of the tariff war has clearly brought challenges, but China is demonstrating its strong adaptability and self-adjustment capabilities through rapid and effective countermeasures. By optimizing its industrial structure and strengthening cooperation with other countries, China is not only responding to external pressures, but also building a strong economy from within. And China, I think, is a responsible country that advocates for a community with a shared future for mankind. Therefore, China not only committed to protecting its own industries, but also to ensuring the stability of the global economy. China's policy is to expand opening up and international cooperation. In terms of promoting industrial openness, China has steadily expanded institutional openness in terms of rules, regulations, management, standards, etc., and promoted the integration of international high-standard economic and trade rules in conditional free trade pilot zones and free trade ports, attracting more foreign investment and advanced technology to enter the Chinese market, and enhancing China's voice and influence in global economic governance.
Right. And Dr. Ahmed, lastly, Pakistan's strategy is very important when we talk about these tariffs. Different analysts have noted that Pakistan's trade surplus is around $3 billion with US, and it is very modest as compared to 32 other nations. And considering Pakistan's exports to US contribute only 0.16% to total US imports, what measures can be taken by the government at this point in time to negotiate?
Well, I've heard numerous economists saying that the US's tariffs to Pakistan won't have a huge impact, which is correct because Pakistan has a very tiny share of trade surplus to the US and a tiny share of what Pakistan exports to the US, but still makes US a very strong trading partner. The issue with Pakistan lies within the house. We don't have enough exports in any case, right? So the tariffs don't affect us that much. However, whatever the effect is, we can negotiate, or even if we don't negotiate, doesn't make a big impact. But the thing that we need to be very cautious about as a country and on the economic front is the fact that India still has tariffs which are 3 to 4% lower than what Pakistan has, and other countries have the correct right to play smartly and negotiate.
Yes, trade volume is pretty huge, $46 billion we are talking about when it comes to India.
Yes, but in the tariff that has been imposed on India is slightly lower than what has been imposed on Pakistan. And if India or other countries play it smart, they can outlaw Pakistan in what Pakistan exports to the US. So we have to keep an eye there. Even though it's being said vastly that we are not greatly impacted. True, that's true. I agree to it. It doesn't matter. But why doesn't matter? One, because Pakistan doesn't have a huge magnitude of trade to any other country. The second reason is Pakistan also doesn't have a lot of export globally. Like India has huge global exports, Pakistan doesn't. India's tariffs imposed by US are 3 to 4% lower than what has been imposed on Pakistan. So that is one factor. Also, the third thing is Laos, China, Vietnam, Cambodia have higher tariffs than Pakistan, but they can depreciate their currencies. If you see from pure economic, macroeconomic point of view, they can depreciate their currencies and they can make their exports more competitive in the market, which will then bring a backlash on Pakistan's export, and that is going to affect the Pakistani exports. So Pakistani businessmen right now have to play it very smart. They have to increase their competitive edge. They have to, the government has to create an environment where there is certainty, there is political stability, and power charges, etc., to make Pakistani exports more competitive and in line with these, because these are upcoming threats. Other countries can depreciate their currencies, so things can happen. We can't just have a blind eye towards these facts.
Right, that is very important. And very briefly, Dr. Chohan, since of course Trump's America's policy has fundamentally challenged post-World War II trade system and has triggered retaliatory or countermeasures from a lot of countries. How should or what measures should be taken by the government at this point in time for Pakistan to be an early mover?
You have two approaches, basically. One is that you do nothing and wait and see how other countries react to this. There's no need to go for it because it's not the end of the world. Your remittances are larger than your exports now anyways. And the US is just 25% of your exports anyways. It's not a big deal. The other way is to just import more from the US to make it balance out, because if you export 6 billion to them, just import 6 billion. That's it, all right? So you import 2.5, just add 3.5 to that, and there are valuable things that the US does produce for us. For example, machinery and that sort of thing can be used here, and you square it off. It wouldn't even be a big deal, and you'd be on their good side. That's an easy way to do it. In the long run, if we don't do anything, our remittances are still the main source of foreign income. If we do something, there are many ways to go about it, but I've just given you the shorthand of it. Just balance it out. Just import 3.5 billion from the US, and you'll be fine.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Usman Chohan, for joining us in today's program. Thank you very much, Aima Mehdi, for joining us in today's program. Thank you very much, Mr. Shang Shi Jong, for joining us in today's program. That's all from Game Changer tonight. Take care. Allah Hafiz.